Our program tonight, as you've gathered, has to look at information sharing, electronic information sharing. We have three fabulous panelists to present to us. And let me try and get the first presentation up here while I'm talking. Our goal, especially for those who haven't been here before, is to hear briefly from each of three experts. Let's see if we can find us. That's the easier way to do it. Thank you. For each of three experts who have knowledge of different aspects of the problem we're looking at at that time. Tonight, all three people tend to be more on the science end. Sometimes, depending on the topic, we might have somebody from the law, or from the arts or humanities, or from a theological perspective, so that we can get a richer view of whatever we're looking at. Our plan in all cases is to first hear from some people who have some expertise on the topic for the evening, and then to engage the audience in a discussion. We have a great belief in the collective wisdom of our community to, once you understand what the issues are and aware of what some of the concerns are, talk about where the challenges are and how we might best address them. So I want you, as you hear these presentations, to be thinking about what questions you have. You can ask individual questions of each panelist as he finishes, or you can hold your questions for a collective discussion that we'll hold at the end. I should also note at this point that at the end, two things. One is that in celebration of the Science Fair Awards tonight, David Higgins and David Miles have brought a celebration cake that they have contributed for this evening. So if you stick around long enough, you are allowed to have some cake. And we will I think we should make sure that the award winners get the cake first. But after they get their cake, Kate Callan, who I can introduce you to as we get to the back, is asking if she could take a photo of each of you that we could have, in addition to the photos that I tried taking up here. I'm also the photographer of the Ethics Center. We have a very deep staff. So anyway, so we're going to begin with Julie Wartell, who's going to talk about an aspect of electronic information sharing that some of you may already be aware of, but for those of you who aren't, it may be interesting and astounding to you how this works. So I'm going to get Julie's
presentation. Can I ask a question, by the way?
Sure.
So the picture taking, do we have to send releases for those?
So there is a slide which came up at the beginning that explains that if you are present, we may take your picture. However, if anybody does not want their picture included, and people have asked us that in the past, then we ask them to sit in the back corner on the right side, so I know to not take their picture. So if anybody would not like their picture included in our publicity, I'll guarantee you that we will keep the Union Tribune from making a full page image of whatever we have here. It'll probably be the back of your head anyway.
Another question, are those winning essays available on the website or anything for us to read?
We didn't post the essays last year, but we're thinking of talking to the students this year about whether they would feel comfortable with us posting their essays. That will be their choice. We can check with them, and that will be a nice thing to include on the website where people could link to them. I will try and let you know by email if we get those posted. Okay, so our first speaker, and let me give you the next one. And also, I don't give you detail usually about the speakers' bios because we've passed those out. We want to try and move the program along as expeditiously as we can. So, Julie, your turn. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so Mike said science is here tonight and not law, and I'm not science or law. I'm a crime analyst, and first thing to know about that is it's not like CSI. That's usually the question I get when I say I'm a crime analyst, and it's far more boring. I sit behind a computer and do crime statistics, crime trends, and crime maps. So what I'm going to talk to you tonight about is sharing information, crime information with the public, and privacy issues and issues surrounding the sharing of information, because there's a lot of crime information that is technically public information, and we in San Diego region have attempted to share as much information as possible while still protecting privacy and following the letter of the law. So the reasons to share crime information electronically, and I have a note down here at the bottom. This actually came, a lot of this from a publication that I co-authored about 8 years ago, and we're finding that a lot of the issues are still very relevant. So with that said, we'll go to all the reasons why it's important that I feel, and a lot of people feel, that we should share crime information, not only with the public, but with other researchers, and there's a lot of benefit to it. So less work for the agency. We in police departments, in law enforcement agencies, get a lot of calls from the public. I'm moving to this neighborhood, what's crime like? My kid is going to college in San Diego, what's crime like in that neighborhood? So instead of answering all those calls, that's one of the reasons we put up a website. And when I say we, and I'll talk a little bit about the history of sharing crime maps and crime data in San Diego in a few slides, but part of it was to reduce the calls to the police department so the crime analysts wouldn't have to keep answering the phone and giving out the statistics and the maps. Increase public awareness to the masses. So if you're a victim of a crime, and I don't know how many of you have gone into the police department or called to try and get a copy of your crime report. Well, when we have thousands and thousands in San Diego and in the larger cities, that it's really difficult to look at crime as a bigger problem. So this is one way to do it, to share it on the web in a map or in mass data. An informed community makes a better partner. A lot of talk over the last 10 years or so about community policing, neighborhood policing, partnering with the community. And this is one way to do it. We can't partner with the community if we don't inform the community about what's going on. Show where problems exist and where they don't. A lot of people think like, oh, that whole neighborhood is rampant with crime. And I'll give you an example, and I use this example a lot, and I'm going to do a quick little demo at the end of my presentation, but Pacific Beach. A lot of people think, oh, Pacific Beach is rampant with crime. I live in Pacific Beach, and I wouldn't live there if it was rampant with crime. There are parts of Pacific Beach that have certain crimes more than others. But this is one way of kind of taking away a lot of those myths and saying it's not everywhere. We might have higher crime in certain areas, but not everywhere. Facilitate partnerships with researchers. As a practitioner in a law enforcement agency, I also teach at UCSD, but also work closely with researchers in the criminology field. And researchers add a lot of value. Researchers can't do good research unless they have good data. So having access to data, and again, electronically, being able to download thousands and thousands of crime cases adds to and enriches research. Help ensure data accuracy. There was just an article a few months ago in the LA Times that the LA Times looked at the LAPD's crime maps and noticed there was a big dot that they looked into further, and it turns out that it was geocoded is the technical term, but essentially all crime that didn't have an address was being put in the exact same spot in LA. So they had this huge crime problem that was not accurate. And then holding the law enforcement agency accountable, and that's similar to that. If we're going to share crime data with the public, we've got to expect to have accurate, timely, all of that information. And so by providing the data to the public helps keep law enforcement more accountable. So on the flip side of it, and there are definitely naysayers, I've spoken on this topic since 1996 when we first put up crime maps on the website. And a lot of people come up with a lot of different reasons why law enforcement should not share crime data. So one of them, information might be used for commercial purposes. And there is always that fear that alarm company is going to take your data and hound you because they know your neighborhood has a lot of residential burglaries. So all of these that I'm going to talk about could potentially happen. We did a study in 1999 and looked into a lot of these issues, and we found that they really didn't happen, not nearly as much as possible.
Julie, just to jump in real quick on number one, there have actually been laws that have been passed that forbid the sharing of information in commercial entities. So not only are agencies using discretion, but it's got the force of law behind it as well to not allow that.
That's good to know. Yes?
Could you give the quick definition of crime?
Breaking of a law. In the broadest terms, crime is breaking of a law. In a more specific term, and actually coming up here, I'll talk about certain crimes do have more privacy issues and laws protecting the sharing of the crime data. In San Diego, we share as much as possible, which is a lot more than places around the country. There are a lot more police departments, law enforcement, sharing crime information, and it's the basic murder, rapes, robberies type of thing. We share a lot more than the typical crimes that you hear about in the crime stats. Offenders may use data to target their crimes. And interestingly on this one, I've heard both ends of it. That an offender, for instance, a drug dealer, will look on these maps and see, wow, look at where all the drug arrests are. I think I'll go there because there's a lot of drugs over there, right? But on the other side of it, look at where all the drug arrests are. That must mean all the cops are over there, so I'm going to go over there. So I figure we're splitting the difference if half the offenders are going to the places for the crime. Okay, identification of higher crime areas may cause property values to go down or insurance to go up. Yes, redlining was in actuality in the, 60s, 70s. We did not find anything close to redlining or any issues with the insurance rates, with property values in terms of crime data. You know, a lot of people said when we first did it, oh, the real estate agents are not going to be happy because how are they going to sell a house in a neighborhood that has all those dots on it? Well, we, and when I say we, back in '96, the police chief at the time and I went to the Realtors Association and spoke on it, and the realtors also said, you know, we actually like this because we didn't want to make the judgments of this is a high crime area or not. We can refer people now and say, look on the website and make your own judgments for that area. Data is open to misinterpretation. Happens all the time, and you know, I always promote why law enforcement agencies should put their own data out, because if someone else does, who doesn't know the data, then it's going to be open for more misinterpretation. Oh, go backwards there. And then privacy issues, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide, since this is about privacy issues and information sharing. So one of the big issues with privacy and crime information are the victims. Are the victims going to get re-victimized or other issues about it? So, you know, if we put out exact information and we said this is exactly where the rape happened or the murder, well, murder, they can't get re-victimized, right? Sorry, bad joke. You know, if you had your house burglarized and people find out that the houses that are burglarized, well, it's easier to go back. And actually, just a little bit of crime prevention on the side here. If you get your house burglarized, you're way more likely to get re-burglarized than the person next door who didn't get burglarized in the first place. So, if you get burglarized, put on more protection. Okay. So, victim may not be cooperative. All these things, like if you're a victim and if you know that anyone in the world can look and see that your house was a victim or that you were a victim, there could be issues. And that's a big reason why we want to protect the exact location. And I'll show you how we do that in San Diego County and how many are doing it throughout the country and throughout the world. Sex-related crime data. So that is the classification of data, rapes, other types of child molest, things like that, that do have more protections in terms of privacy issues. So if the public can go into a law enforcement agency and get a copy of a crime report, the name, any personal identifying information is blacked out of that information. So what we do in San Diego, in terms of, even though we don't have exact addresses, what we've done is an extra layer for these crimes that have this extra protection, in that there is virtually no way to identify the dot on the map and associate it with a house. If you were a victim of a rape at your house, then you're the only house on the street, then you will not see that dot on the map. So that's some of the information that is more protected are the sex-related crime data. And the other one is juvenile crime data. And a lot of that, because a lot of crimes that happen, we don't know the victim age. If, well, a house, you know, it's not going to be a juvenile. But if there's an assault, there's no information on that a juvenile was assaulted or not. The juvenile crime data that is way more protected than adult is more the offender side. So if a juvenile is arrested, that's the data that's often more protected than if an adult is arrested. You can't get, the public, especially even law enforcement in some cases, can't get that information electronically or not.
How do you identify though if it's a crime happens in a park or at the beach? So how does it get tied into does it get tied into someone's residence?
No. So wherever the crime happens, wherever the incident happens, if there's an address, then it's put at that address. So that's why one of the first initial ideas was, oh my gosh, we better not have any rapes on here. But then we said, no, if there are rapes happening in a park, we want to know that. We're still protecting, there's no way to know who the victim is, but we do need to know if there are rapes happening in a park or on a street or in some public location.
But how about robberies, for instance?
Or robberies, or any of that. So a quick history on our public system. How many people have heard or used the public crime mapping system in San Diego? Good number, good. So real quick history, in 1996, as I mentioned, I was working for San Diego Police Department at the time, and we put up what we called static maps. So we made graphics. We had, at the time, 99 neighborhoods in the city of San Diego that were defined, and once a month we would put maps on the website that you could look at just a picture. So you couldn't search, but you could look at each neighborhood and see where crimes were for that month. In 1999, the Automated Regional Justice Information System created a county-wide interactive mapping system. And then in 2006, I was involved with, again, we upgraded it, and that's what I'm going to do a real quick demo of tonight. So an overview of that system. We have 10 law enforcement agencies in San Diego County, 9 police departments and the Sheriff's Department. All agencies feed crime data, arrest data, all of those papers that they're filling out into this ARGIS system, and that's what the mapping system is feeding off of. There's 1 year of data in 3-month increments. And the reason we did that was because if you don't know and you say, I want San Diego County a year of data, you'd crash your system, our system, and see a big blob. So the way we limit that is that you can't do it citywide and you can't do a whole year at a time. So you can do 3-month increments. We have crime type, date, time, and then the 100-block location. So that's how we're protecting the exact address. Even though the dot is approximately on the street around the address, that when you click on the information, you only see 2300 Main Street or 100 Broadway. You don't see 110 or 112 or things like that. I just checked some current stats. We had in May 19,000 visits, and over 7,000 people are coming back more than once. So a lot of regular users, and people are spending about 14 minutes on the website. So let's see, it's always questionable about doing a live
So you have
demo.
cookies.
I have cookies? I think you guys ate all the cookies. I'm not sure how that works. I think it's an IP address that they're collecting. So the first thing when you get there is a disclaimer, and it's essentially, as Erin said, that if you use this information, it's not just commercial purposes, but you can't use this information to go out and do anything bad with it. And what it also says in there is that it's not perfect, so don't do anything good or bad with this information. Verify it. The whole idea is that it's a picture of what's going on. And here's some information. The first time you go to the site, take a look at what is and what isn't on there. Certain little quirks about crime on the university campuses, currently not on there. Actually, a separate project, we're working on that, and that's a location issue. UCSD all has one address, so it's very difficult to map crime on the campus, San Diego State, any of the big campuses. So what you get to then is you pick your location, and as I said, we'll go to, we pick the city of San Diego. Once you pick your location, you can then get, here's a list of schools, hospitals, zip codes, neighborhoods, all the different things that you can search on. So if we click on neighborhoods, then we can go down to, just to prove that Pacific Beach has a little bit of crime going on. Once we have our location, we then can pick which incidents we want. And what we see here are the list of incidents on the left side. So these are all the different crime types that you can choose. And then you can also choose some different arrests and citations and different traffic-related information. On the right side are the different definitions. So for those of you that don't know the difference between a robbery and a burglary, you can see the differences before you click on them. You can also see what the symbols. Click on the folder, and you'll get everything under the folder. time period, it defaults to the most recent month, so this data is updated once a week on early Sunday mornings, so it's updated to whatever's been entered up until Sunday morning. You can pick a, narrow down your time, narrow down your days if you want. We'll just leave it as everything. And click map. And you cross your fingers and hope it doesn't take too long. While that's running, any questions about this?
What kind of crimes are not mappable, they are not geographic? What don't you, and what are your sources of arrest reports, convictions, etc.?
So, good question. Well, a crime that's not mappable doesn't have an address. And we do have crimes the person had something stolen and they didn't know where they were or where it was stolen from. So there are crimes that just don't have an address or it's listed as unknown on the crime report. So under crimes, it would be essentially a crime occurred, nothing to do with a suspect or an arrest, but if you're a victim of an auto theft, a burglary, a rape, a robbery, etc. The arrests and citations are the offender side. So if someone is arrested for drugs, for prostitution, for drunk driving, those are the arrest report addresses of the incident. So where the DUI was, where the drug arrest was. Nothing to do with whether they were prosecuted or not. So this is all on the police side still. And then the traffic accidents as well as a police report. So what you see here is Pacific Beach with all the different crimes. And you can click on the different things, zoom in, zoom out. One of the things is totals is it will give you the legend and the number of symbols. So one thing to remember, and again that's in the about, is if a number of crimes, if 4 crimes all happened at the exact location, you're only going to see 1 dot. So you can click on that dot and see all 4, but there was no way to show all 4 dots sitting on top of each other. So this gives you numbers. These are not the official stats. Every police department and the sheriff's department puts out their own official stats. This again is an idea of sharing the information with the public to get a picture, a trend of what's going on. And hopefully then once you learn about it, you can then contact your police department if you have concerns and say, I noticed we had a lot of burglaries. What can we all work to do about it? So you can see here, if you can see in the back, aggravated assault, non-domestic violence. So these would be any assaults that are not, we don't have domestic violence in there. Commercial burglaries 4, vandalism 21, on down. Vehicle break-ins 33, that's probably the biggest problem, 16 vehicle thefts. And you can create a little 8.5 by 11 map, you can create a report. And I'm gonna move on from there. So that was a real brief. It's arjis.org is the website. And one more just quick slide to wrap up. So if you didn't think that there were any benefits, these are kind of outlined to you, and the whole idea of easily accessible crime information. We want to share as much as we can while protecting privacy and dealing with those types of issues. We want to increase knowledge to the public, to the masses, in order to partner with the police. And it's free and relatively easy to use, depending on how computer savvy. We tried to make it as easy and straightforward as possible. So with that, I think I turn it back over to Mike, right?
Thank you, Julie. So that's, actually I should have asked just any specific questions for clarification on Julie's presentation before we go on. We can come back to general questions, but yes.
How does that integrate with, all I noticed by the initial CII, the California
Identification Index.
Right.
The CII is if you're arrested, all right, that's really loud. If you're arrested in California, you get an identification number, that's your CII number, and that follows you for life. Nothing to do with this mapping application or this type of crime data.
I happened to see the arrest record on the person. There's 3 different versions of it. I tried to find out through the CII if there were, what their version of his arrests were, and they went and provided me that information.
That's different protected information when it's that personal information.
Why should it be protected?
I don't know that we have time to go into that, but we'll talk a little bit more about that maybe at the end in terms of the ethics and privacy and legal issues there.